Hi, thanks for joining me in this tutorial of Google Read and Write for the Chrome extension. Later in this Google slide presentation, we will be talking about the different devices that you can have with Google Read and Write. But for this tutorial and demonstration, we're just going to be focusing on the Chrome extension. So I've pulled up an online article to show you some things that we can do within this extension. And if I go up here to the top right corner of my toolbar, I'll see my extension link. And I'm going to walk you through some of the features that are on this toolbar. The first feature I'd like to show you is this hover feature. If I take my cursor and I just start hovering over one section of the reading, it should begin to play. I've been having some trouble with it with just this one section. We'll try again in a few minutes, but for now, we'll just focus on playing it. In order to get this start right here, I'm going to go ahead and highlight the front. And if I want the Google Read and Write technology to read to me, I'll just hit play.
Have you ever gone to Gorilla Days?
Now with this reader, I have the option of changing the reading syntax or tone. I have the option of switching between English variety of types of speech. And then we have the option of changing the speed of how quickly that reader is going to read to the user. We can change it from continuous reading. You saw how in the example just then it continued reading after what I had highlighted had passed. Or I could have the reader stop and speak on each word or speak on each sentence. Try this one more time, see if it goes. So when I'm not in this feature, or when I'm not Screencast-O-Matic video recording, it works a lot better. But what happens is you'll hover over a sentence and it will begin to read that sentence. Now this feature, this hover speech feature, is interesting because it will not continue unless you It won't continue unless my cursor is following along. It'll begin, but then it will stop and repeat wherever my cursor is. So that's kind of a nice feature if you want students to be able to, or you want students to be forced to track more kinesthetically what they're reading on the page.
That's reasonable.
All right, so we also have this ability to take a term, highlight it, and come up with a picture definition. If someone is more of a visual learner and they need to make that connection in that way. Or we can come up with the text definition of that term. Again, it's whatever we're highlighting is going to be what the text definition is going to be looking at. Right? This screenshot reader doesn't work as effectively as it should. Ideally, what should happen is you should be able to just screenshot or just drag your cursor and make a box over whatever you'd like it to read. It won't read anything else, just that one sentence or phrase. This discover or prediction we'll go into a little bit later as well. So we've covered all these. If we wanted to have students, if they were interested in learning more about infection, they might be able to use this web search, and it just pulls up a Google search of whatever you've highlighted. This is a pretty neat tool. It will only lighten sections of the page, so it might help a reader track more effectively what they are looking at and reading. We have some options that you can use in changing it. Again, you can get to this options page by going up here as well. And then you get out of it. So, okay. We'll talk about that in a second. And then we have translators. What I've done already on this page to save time is I've gone ahead and I've highlighted some terms in yellow. I've highlighted some scientists in green, and I'll show you what we can do with those highlights. So if I wanted to pull some vocabulary lists, it's going to pull all the ones that I've highlighted. And all it's done is it's going to create another page with all those highlights. And it's pulled, remember I had infection highlighted. It's pulled the word, the meaning, and the symbol that's associated with it. And so now I could have my students take notes on why that's important for them to include if that's what I wanted to do. So this is a nice way of them pulling up a vocabulary list out of text. If I wanted just to pull my highlights of Paul Ehrlich, right? Let's just say I'm just going to pull all the highlights of the scientists that I've done. I'm going to select the color. I've decided the color is green, and I'm going to hit OK. This is going to create another document, right, where it's just pulling out the highlights. Now, I only have 2 scientists highlighted, but maybe I would have highlighted some quotes of theirs that were in that document in green, and that would have showed up here as well. It's kind of a nice way to simplify and summarize some key aspects and components of the reading, so that as a reader or a user, I don't have to go through all of that extra data on my page. And there will always be a link to the original document that shows up at the bottom of the page, along with the email of whoever is using the Google Read and Write feature. So we'll go back to this page. If I wanted to, I could clear the highlighting, right? Again, this is going to be what's determining what we collect. We collect those highlights. And the last thing, or second to last thing I want to show you is this simplify page. If I click this, right, it's going to end up having a page that looks just like this. It takes a little bit of time. That's why I pull it up ahead of time. A lot of the same features occur still at the top of the page for this site, but what it's done is it's taken away all of the extra information on the page. So you no longer see all the links on the side, and it's clearer and cleaner, and you can change the background if it's easier for a reader. You can change the font size and the font type, and you can make it single or double, right? Things that are going to help you read it. A lot of the same things you can still do. You could still highlight things if you wanted to. You could still pull them out and do all of your extra things that I showed you on that last document. The other interesting feature about this is that right now all of the text is the same as it was on the previous article. But what I could do is I could make it even more simplified. So what it's taking is it's taking out the extra information. And if we make it in its very simplified form, you'll see that it's a much shorter document. It has a lot less information in it. That could be like not a good thing for a student, especially if you want them to get that specific information. But the overall idea of the article remains the same. If you were to read this very simplified version of this article and the original article, you would come away with that reading with the same idea, the same concept being understood, but you wouldn't necessarily have all of the intricacies of what you might want your students to leave with. So it's just something to keep in mind, but I thought that was a pretty cool feature. The last, and you can always embed some audio notes in this as well. The last feature I want to show you on this page is this practicing reading aloud feature. So if I click it, again, I'm still on a simplified page. I could do this with a normal article, but we'll stick with this one. And we'll scroll down. We'll just do maybe this section, right? So I could practice reading. I could record this. I could say, a scraped knee is one way that antibiotic-resistant bacteria can invade your body. I can hit play. And then I could send that off to my teacher. This is a nice way for students to be able to self-assess and monitor their own reading ability and own speaking ability when it comes to reading aloud. So this is a pretty neat feature that you can have students give you some formative information on. And last but not least, we have the predictive text and the speech talk and type text. So we'll go with the talk and type first. So if I wanted just to say aloud what I've learned from the article, period, I would go ahead and do this. Now, it's not catching all of the grammar, and if I forget to put in commas or periods, it becomes a lot harder to follow, period. And there are some mistakes that are happening, if you'll notice in the text as I speak, period. It can be difficult for a student who has some sort of speech impediment or difficulty with speaking to use this feature, but it is a really good feature for students who might be not as physically developed or don't have the reading or writing comprehension needed in order to complete assignments, period. Clearly, some explicit teaching needs to happen for students to know how to correctly input grammar and capitalization and in their writing using this feature, period. So again, a lot of that is just free-flowing. It will pick up everything. So some explicit teaching needs to be done. But again, students can go ahead and listen to what they've just written and make some corrections while they do that. So this is the predictive text feature. You'll see that underneath it's giving me some more text, and it'll read aloud. It's giving me some more options. For what I could be putting in here. And as I begin to write more about specific things, it'll catch on to that. So if I was writing a whole article about disease, it'll catch on to that, and a lot more of the see, look, now it's saying antibiotics. A lot more of the predictive text will be applicable to what I'm trying to write. So that is some of the features available on Google Read and Write Chrome extension. And thanks so much for joining me. I hope you learned something.